Hey ANPers, this is Dr. Jones checking in. This is ANP1 lecture test 3 video 13? Nah, we did 13. We're on 14. So this is video 14. We're on Noteset page 15, which for me looks like this. We're here, types of movements. Types of movements. I'm writing it down. Movements. All right, so types of movements include gliding movement. This will be like, I drop my highlighter. Writing is gliding. An angular movement is if you're changing the angle to in this case, the paper. Circumduction, where'd we go? This is when you go around a circle, like you do this with your finger or your thumb. And then rotation. That's rotation. Okay, so those are types of movements. Gliding movement is a slight linear movement, and you find this at the wrists and ankles. Flexion, extension, and hyperextension have to deal with the position on the anterior-posterior plane. So flexion decreases the angle between the bones. So usually it's moving forward, although flexing the knee, you'll move it back. So it decreases the angle between the joints. So flexion, here's flexed. Flexion in the neck is forward, flexion at the wrist is forward, flexion at the hip is forward, but flexion at the knee will go back. So the opposite of kicking, unkicking. Extension is when you increase the angle between the bones. It's the opposite of flexion. It's where you go back to anatomical position. So back to anatomical position, back to anatomical position, and this back to anatomical position. Hyperextension, here, extension would be this way. Hyperextension is when you go past anatomical position. Past anatomical position. Don't hyperextend your elbow. You can't hyperextend your elbow without breaking it. You can hyperextend your hip. So for the wrist, here's flexion, extension, hyperextension. So if you're looking down at your phone, what action is that at the neck? That is flexion. And then your professor calls on you and says, hey, look up front, that's extension. And then you hear noise from the ceiling and you look straight up at the ceiling, that is hyperextension. There you go. Okay. And then at the elbow, flexion, and back to anatomical position is extension. And again, you can't hyperextend the elbow without breaking it. No, hyperextend my thumb there. That's just how it goes. Double jointed is not a thing. There are no double joints. What double jointed means is that there is less stability with the ligaments and tendons. So it indicates an increased ability for joint problems. All right, abduction and adduction. Abduction is moving away from midline. Adduction is when you add them back together. So abduct is move away from midline. And you can see that in the wrist. You can't even, it's a picture on the next page, abduct and adduct your fingers towards the midline of your hand. So abduction is the jump of the jumping jack. Adduction is when you jump back. I just moved all my limbs and you couldn't see any of it. So that was useful. So abduction of the wrist will be towards midline. Adduction is away from midline. The book recommends for abduction that you think about your children being abducted and taken away. I think the author of our book is a monster. Abducting children? That's where we're going with No. But for adduction, you add them back together. Now, in the muscles of the inner thigh, are they going to, that's right, they're going to adduct. They're going to add back together. So this in lab is one of the places where, even when we're taking it in person and you're getting partial credit, one letter can make it entirely wrong. The lateral thigh muscles are abductors because they pull the leg out. The inner thigh muscles are adductors because they pull the thigh in. And so if you get that letter wrong, it's wrong. It's just wrong. That's a complete misunderstanding of the entire concept of everything that's happening here. Yeah. Okay, so and then in the hand, abduction is moving the fingers apart. Adduction is adding them back together. All right, circumduction is around in a circle. I got a bum shoulder. I can't do that anymore, but here, this finger, you can circumduct your thumb. All right, so circumduct is it's an angular movement that draws a circle. Okay. Medial and lateral rotation, and this happens with the limbs, and it happens at the shoulder and at the hip. So medial rotation is also called internal rotation. It happens at the shoulder where you rotate the whole arm in. I literally can't get on camera here. All right. You rotate the whole shoulder in and rotate it out. So what does this look like in the feet? Medial rotation will be toe in, like pigeon-toed, and lateral rotation is toe out. Okay. At the neck, you have left rotation and right rotation. Left rotation, right rotation. Flexion, extension, hyperextension, left rotation, right rotation. There's two more, and we'll cover those, I think, on the next page. Okay, so the lateral external rotation happens at the shoulder and at the hip. The medial internal rotation happens at the shoulder and at the hip joint. This next one, should be the next one, yeah. This next one happens at the shoulder. So at the shoulder, you have pronation. Pronation is when the hands are like prone, like down, like when you're prone. Okay. Supination is when your hands can hold a bowl of soup. Now, this is unlike the external rotation and the internal rotation and external rotation that happen at the shoulder. This happens at the elbow, okay? Supinate, pronate, supinate, pronate. And what happens here, and you can see this on the picture, in supination, you're in anatomical position and the radius and the ulna are parallel. But then when you pronate, the radius rotates over the ulna and makes an X. So that's how pronation happens. And then inversion and eversion happen at the ankle. Inversion is the most common sprain strain of the ankle. Generally, if you're going to get a sprain strain of the ankle, it will be an inversion sprain strain because these lateral ligaments are weaker. So eversion, inversion would be like if you walk on the lateral sides of your feet. Eversion is if you walk on the medial sides of your feet. Easier to show in person. Dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. Plantar flexion is when you move towards the plantar region, which is the sole of the foot. Dorsiflexion is when you move away. So it's weird because like they're both called flexion. Just why? So if you're walking on your toes, then you are in plantar flexion. What if you're walking on your heels and your toes aren't touching the floor? Then that's dorsiflexion. You got it. And then opposition, reposition. So the whole opposable thumb thing is the neat thing about being Homo sapien, one of the neat things. So opposition, reposition. And you can go to any of the fingers, opposition, or just across like a 4 and back for reposition, and that's opposition. Yeah. Set the thumb. Okay. Opposable thumbs. All right, and then these next one are at the jaw. Protraction is when you stick your jaw out, like, and then retraction is when you pull it back in, or like shoulder, protraction, retraction. Technically it's at the jaw, but it's hard to show, so we'll show it the shoulder. Depression is when you open your mouth. Elevation is when you shut your mouth. So when you chew, the chomp part is which? The chomp part is the elevation. But to open your mouth to get the food in your face is depression, elevation. So again, on the shoulder, elevation, depression. And okay, that was it. That was page 13? 14. That was page 15. I'm on the wrong page. That was page 15, ANP1, lecture test 3, video. If it was page 15, then it was video 14, because we're doing a video for now, just to make sure they record on my computer, because it's really frustrating when the longer videos don't record, so we're doing smaller ones. It's easier for me to deal with it. So thank you, as always, for tuning in. You can do this. Just keep studying. The education must go on. Dr. J out.